Welcome to the Culture Encounters podcast. I'm your host, Chad Obi, and this evening I'm happy to bring to you part two of a very personal episode to me, the episode on autism. Now, I was diagnosed about a month ago with autism, and last week we kind of started to delve into that story. Um, I cannot thank everyone enough for who has reached out to me and talked to me about this and everything. Um, and I cannot thank Amma enough for helping me share my story. You know, I was just going to do it alone. I was just going to talk about it. And she said, I'm not going to let you do that alone. She knew how emotionally vulnerable I could potentially be, in that situation. Um, Thank you again, Amma. I cannot say enough positive things about you and your family. You've treated me as a member of the family for, almost 8 years now. So um, thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart. And thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart, everyone who has reached out to me in the last week or so. Um, Without further ado, let's get to part two of the Culture Encounters podcast, autism. Make her prognosis.
Right, right. So question for you. I know you have mentioned masking over like in this conversation a few times, so it kind of piqued my interest for a moment. Do you think that is a common go-to almost protection for people who have some form of diagnosis who
I do.
just want to fit in? Do you think that there are a lot of people probably walking around just masking just to so they can fit in?
Yes.
Hmm,
Great
that's
question,
interesting.
and I do think that for
Yeah.
sure. I think that you because again you become hyper vigilant to,
Mm,
and I am not the poster child for autism, and
mhm.
I am not in everyone's brain, but
Right.
in my experience and other people that I've spoken to, you
Mhm.
are so hyper aware of the fact that you are different, and because you are hyper
Mhm.
aware of the fact that you are different, you do everything you can to try to hide that, to try to fit in. Um,
Um,
and because you're hyper aware, you're different, you're sensitive to how other people are perceiving you. And you're
mm,
very interested in your self perception, like other people's perception of you, I
yeah,
mean.
of you. Yeah.
Yeah, you very much have your image of how you want people to see you. Um,
Mm.
and it gets to a point where that's when the masking and the character playing and all of that kind of starts.
That must be exhausting though.
It is, yeah, it's very tiring.
Yeah. So now
For
that you've been diagnosed and now that you understand fully what it is that's happening and going on, do you feel like you still have to mask or now you feel like you can actually just be yourself?
That's a great question. I think I'm still kind of figuring that out.
Mm,
Because you get to a point where when you're my age of 32 and you've probably had, these things your entire life at this point for me,
mhm.
the masking behavior, at what point the masking behaviors kind of meld into your actual, like your behaviors and it kind of
Mm, right,
start
right.
to kind of spiral together.
Mhm,
So, the authentic, like I've always like emotionally been very authentic with people.
mhm,
Um, I think that it allows me to knowing the diagnosis of ASD allows me to kind of like not excuse negative behaviors, but kind of
mhm.
put a context for them.
Right.
And then, like, if I do something different or
Mhm.
weird or, whatever the case may be, the people in my life might be like, okay, that's what that is.
Yeah.
And it kind of helps me to know that it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, knowing that I have autism means that, yes, I'm different and that's
Mhm.
okay. And even if you don't get that diagnosis, like
Yeah.
even if you have, even if there's no diagnosis there, if you're different, that's okay.
Yeah.
And our differences are awesome. Like
Mhm.
they're like you were saying, like the way my brain recalls information for like my working memory is terrible, but my like long term
Yeah,
memory, the
that's
fact that I can
amazing.
think
Yeah.
like and that is, it's something I'm proud of, and I'm very lucky that I have that.
Mhm.
And there are another positive too is I am able to. I think I'm relatively good at listening to people's
Mm.
like when I can connect with people emotionally, it makes me better at it because I'm so hyper vigilant about
Mm,
how people see me
right.
that it kind of lets me empathize a little bit. I don't
Yeah.
always succeed at that. Nobody does, but
Yeah.
um, there are times when it's like, oh, this is great because now I can, like if a kid needs to talk to me, one of my students needs to talk to me about something, I know that
Yeah.
you know, I can have that conversation and kind of understand what they're going through.
Yeah.
At the same time, and this is where I get in trouble.
Mm,
Um, I will know. Um, Part of that is again going back to your original question about masking.
mhm,
You worry about your behaviors a lot.
mhm.
But I'm still kind of working, like I said, working my way through that.
Right.
But what I was about to say actually was about empathy, which is
Mm,
one of the positives that I think has come out of the diagnosis.
mhm.
Is people think that people with autism don't have. Actually, I think there's another question about. Is there a question on there about conceptions? Like,
Uh, there is.
so
There
we'll
is.
talk about that.
And then there's
Yep.
another question I'll ask you before that. But
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah, yeah. The question I think that needs to be asked at this point is, so you are already, you figured out that something, is not going the way you think it should go with you, right? And so
Right.
now you're waiting for this because you were telling me you met with a therapist a couple of times, you had to wait for the diagnosis. So what was going through your mind whilst you were waiting?
Um, I was nervous.
Mm,
But I didn't really realize I was nervous. I was just kind of like, I was ready to hear it. I thought, I was like, all right, cool, we'll hear it.
yeah.
I was ready, and this is gonna sound weird. I was hoping to get a positive diagnosis.
Mm,
And that might sound weird to some people, but let me explain.
yeah.
So when I was waiting to get it, the logic was I wanted to know what I wanted to have a label for it. And some
Mm,
people might not like, again, people are like, oh, you don't need a label, blah, 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 blah. Some people are like really anti label, and I understand
yeah.
that. But
Hmm.
it's kind of like this for me. When you when you find out you have ASD or find out you have ADHD, it opens up knowing the correct diagnosis, or at least at this time, unless something
Hmm.
else, science is changing every day.
Right.
Um, until we get, as of now, this is the correct diagnosis, and
Hmm.
knowing that opens up the parameters and gives you, it provides kind of like a set of parameters for you to look for to find new coping skills to
Right.
help with the level of exhaustion and everything,
Right.
from the constant fight of mental health issues and stuff
Hmm.
like that go along with it.
Hmm.
It's kind of like, okay, you're eating a bowl of rice with chopsticks and you don't know how to use chopsticks.
That's me.
um, right? Uh, how can you gotta eat trying to you can either continue trying to eat the rice
Hmm.
without the chopsticks while
Right.
using the chopstick, or like using the chopsticks but not knowing what you're doing,
Right.
or you can try to eat, you can figure out what you need to do with the tools that you have,
Right.
in order to eat the rice successfully. And man, I want to eat the rice. So it's gonna help me. I think my thought process was putting things in perspective, putting things
Right.
in context is going to help me grow.
That's awesome.
Thank
Well,
you.
listen, you are one brave man, and I cannot tell you how much I admire you for even putting up with this for all these years, right? And then finally figuring out what this has been the whole time. But it's interesting because in preparation for this interview, I kind of went around. So, we're a cultural organization. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
I read up online just to see, just curious to see how autism is perceived around the world, and how is diagnosis, and what do people get, are there any opportunities, luckily for us in the West, right? Like here in America, you were able to get a referral, go to someone, within 3 or 4 visits, they kind of figured it out.
Right.
Right. The rest of the world does not get that per se. But then also, one of the things that I read about was that what the metrics here in the West, does not necessarily, and you and I talked briefly about that before we started this recording, but one
Yeah,
thing I found out, which I kind of already knew, like in my culture, a child is not supposed to make eye contact with an adult when you're
right.
speaking to an adult, right? Because it's considered rude and disrespectful. And so, if a child on the autism spectrum is not making eye contact, it'll be hard to use that as a metric to diagnose because
Yeah,
it's culturally susceptible for the child not to make eye contact, right?
yeah,
And
right.
so, there are little things like that. And then, of course, the stigma that comes with just anything that is considered mental health. Even in our culture here in the West, there is some stigma attached to it. And then in the rest of the world, so I was reading up on South Korea, and that actually, like, if someone is diagnosed with autism, there is such a lack of awareness to a degree that people don't want to marry into the family. So let's say there's a sibling that had autism, then the rest of the family members are in jeopardy as far as finding a suitable mate because they don't want to marry into a family like that, which is completely sad. But I think there's a level of, I don't want to call it ignorance, but lack of knowledge in
Yeah,
things that, and the resources that is needed. And also come to find out that most of the research that has been done into autism, it's here in the West, right? And
right.
so the research is not transferred into overseas. And I think lately there's some work that has been done from what I was reading, but there still is work to be done. And there's a lady that I follow on social media from Ghana, where I'm from, and she has an autistic daughter, and she found out that her daughter, she's nonverbal as well, but she found out that her daughter for some reason will look into the lens of a camera but would not look at another human being, but would focus all her attention. And so she invested money and bought a camera, and now she's a model, and the girl models and is a brand ambassador to several
That's
local
awesome.
brands. But she was able, and she is just one of the very few in the country where I am from who is actually stepping out and saying, you know what, I'm going to help my daughter, who is beautiful, who is a human being 100%, who is entitled to everything we're all entitled to, right? But then
Right.
society, especially the nonverbal ones, society just kind of pushes them to the background. And I'm so
Very
proud
much
of a woman like that. So I follow her. I don't have a special needs child, but I follow her because there is something that she's doing, that she's a trailblazer, and I'm so proud of her. So
absolutely. That's
yeah,
amazing.
absolutely.
I'd love
So
to meet them. Yeah, if you
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's
I would love to meet them.
I will send you her Facebook page, but she's
Please
such
do.
an awesome, awesome woman and what she's doing with her daughter. And so this goes on to my question. My next question, I guess at this point would be a final question, would be, what advice would you give someone either going through their own diagnosis or who is kind of struggling, or or a parent whose child has just been diagnosed? What advice would you give them?
Oh my gosh. I would say the first thing is let yourself, if you're an adult
Hmm.
and you get that diagnosis, let yourself feel whatever it is you feel at that moment.
Mm,
I I was expecting the diagnosis, but when I first got it, there was still a moment of like shock and
yeah.
sadness that I
Mm,
couldn't really explain. Like it was like I knew it was like a good thing that we knew, but like there was still that moment. And I think a lot of that has to do with the stigma, which leads into the next thing.
mhm,
Ignore the stigma and
mm,
don't compare yourself to other people.
right.
Yes, it's autism, but it's a spectrum of
Hmm.
disorders. You know,
Right.
your symptoms may not be the same as mine, may not be the same as somebody else's. Like for example, I am verbal.
Mm,
I am verbal, but
mm,
I have the special interest, special hobby, strong
mm,
long term memory, but struggle with practical skills and really struggle in social situations to
mm,
always read the social cues correctly because I'm trying. It's kind of
mm,
like trying so hard to read that the page gets blurry.
mm.
Um, is the best way I can put to say it.
Wow.
But that's me. You know, that might not be other people. Other people might have other things that they go through. And even if everyone's going through something different, but you're going through something different, but you're not going through it alone. There are,
Right.
there are communities out there, and the world is getting better. Very slowly, but it is getting better as far as acceptance goes and understanding goes. To parents, um, just know that that's okay.
Hmm.
Don't be afraid of labels.
Yeah.
I understand. I understand the fear. I do. I truly do. But it's okay. Um, there are so many wonderful things that your child can do. Um, there are so many wonderful things that they can experience.
Mm,
Um, you know, all you can do is show your kid love.
yeah.
And a lot of what I've been able to do and be successful. My level, by the way, when I say success in this case, like I was actually just talking to my girlfriend about this. I
Mm,
measure success as, am I decently happy and am I doing something I love? And
mm,
that's the case. Yes, I'm successful
yeah.
um, in that respect. So um, I have that because I've had love in my life,
Yeah.
and people who were very very patient with me. So
Mm,
be patient. So to those parents maybe with children who are going through this diagnosis, be patient.
mm,
Know Be patient. Know what your child needs. Listen to the doctors, but also know what your child needs. Advocate for them. You are their advocate,
right.
and also um, being patient with them is great. Know your rights, know your child's rights. I would encourage you
Mhm.
to read a lot.
Yeah.
Again, we're all still learning, but you need to make sure that that your child's being advocated
Yeah.
for sure. And then to, like I said, to other people who may not know that much about ASD, um, definitely don't use autism as a punchline in like a joke, please.
Right.
I saw a kid do that today in my class. It's not okay.
Yeah.
Um, don't use the R word. It's very hurtful.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it. We're not a punchline.
Right.
And also our diagnosis, our mental health. We are more than that.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely. Mm,
yeah, you know what I mean. And that's
mm,
something to people too. Like you tend to
mm,
only see, and that's where the fear comes into doing this video was people tend to only, like, once you have a diagnosis, people only tend to see that.
yeah.
And it's no, and the people first language is a big thing in special education communities now.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's not that's an autistic child. That
Mm,
is a child with autism spectrum disorder.
autism. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that I think is so, it's a little thing, when it comes to
Mm,
how you verbalize something, but I think it's
mm, mm,
um, so important to realize that, like you said, you were a human first,
mhm.
and because you have these special circumstances, um, you might need certain help with some other certain things.
Right.
There are other things you're going to be really good at,
Mm,
like look at Mozart.
yeah.
Like Mozart was a prodigy,
Yeah. Absolutely.
absolute prodigy, and
Yeah.
a lot of scholars now think that he had ASD.
Hmm.
Einstein,
Yeah.
prodigy.
Hmm.
A lot of people think he had ASD.
Yeah.
Dan Aykroyd, the actor, famous,
Hmm.
the Blues Brothers,
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
ASD.
Hmm.
So they're not saying that you need to compare yourself to Dan Aykroyd or Mozart, but like know that you can be happy, fulfilled, successful, have strong relationships with people, and
Right.
most importantly, know that you deserve love and that you can have ASD and it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one thing you said that stood out to me in what you just said is that you have love in your life, right?
Yeah. Right.
And love conquers all. And when you have love in your life, you will do well, And so I think that that is
Right.
such an awesome place
And
to
what
leave.
I thank you. And what I mean by love is, applicable love. So yes,
Yeah,
saying you love someone, but
absolutely.
like love,
Yeah.
like, okay, I love you, so I'm gonna get
Yeah.
you the help that you need. I love
Yeah.
you, so I'm going to talk to these specialists for you. I love you, so I'm gonna get you access to the resources you need.
Mhm.
Uh, you know,
I'm going to
um,
advocate for you.
yes,
Yeah.
I love you, so I'm gonna advocate for you and have a relationship with your teachers.
Right.
That's another thing too. Have a relationship with your child's
Mhm.
educators.
Yeah.
I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah.
Have a relationship with them,
Mm.
because you are all there for the same reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the biggest. I think if you do that from a young age too, if you are
Mhm.
actively engaged
Yeah.
with those educators and you have
Yeah.
a strong educational community around that child, then
Yeah.
you are going to give that kid the tools to eat as much rice as they want.
I love it. Love the rice analogy. My husband
Yeah.
will be proud of you for using rice as the example.
Yeah, that was a little shout. Okay, so I gotta ask: is Killy Willy plantains or rice?
Plantains.
Plantains. Okay, yeah, I was eating some plantains in Atlanta, and they were really good. And I was like,
That's
I think that's what Killy Willy is. So I feel like I'm eating this, and it's really good. But I feel like Alma's gonna tell me that hers are better.
because it is. Because because it is. All right.
I
So
believe it.
final question for you. And then,
Yeah.
so what's next for you?
Oh gosh, that is a great question.
Hmm.
So I actually have a doctor's appointment with my primary care physician
Okay.
um in the next month or so. I need to call and confirm that. And we're going to talk about for the ADHD diagnosis. Just for clarity, I got re-diagnosed with ADHD um, and autism on the same day. We tested for both. So I'm going to talk to her about next steps for that.
Hmm.
And then to the step for that is to get back into therapy because I haven't been at it for a while. That's definitely something down the road I want to do again.
Okay.
Um, and then I think to devote more time to, you know, giving myself a break in social situations,
Hmm.
um, but at the same time advocating for my needs as well better now too.
Yeah.
Now that I know what I need, like knowing how to frame it. Like for example, uh, if like I don't know if a social cue is acceptable in a certain situation, ask.
Hmm. Yeah.
If I need a break from something or like, hey, can I um, get reassurance for something,
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah.
I think just take that diagnosis, see what we can do to help myself with the um, help myself in social situations and also help myself be practical with the things that I need help with, as far as like things around the house and everything, like, like skills, practical skills, and
Mm.
continue to try to get better at the things I can get better at and then forgive myself for the things that I can't.
Yeah.
Forgiveness of yourself is a big thing.
Mm.
Forgive yourself for
Yeah.
the things that you struggle with.
Yeah.
It's
And that's
okay to struggle.
that's applicable to all of us, right?
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
all need to forgive ourselves.
Absolutely. Forgive
Yeah.
yourself for your struggles. Continue trying.
Hmm.
You can always try the next day. There's always tomorrow, right?
Yeah. Oh, those are some true words. Words of wisdom, Mr. Chad.
Thank you. See, I got
Listen,
this. Yeah, just don't ask me to wash a dish.
I know, right? We'll let you
Uh,
slide on that. No, but I listen, you are brave, and I am so grateful that I get to call you friend and that you're part of my tribe and we do this, but we're here for you, rooting for you and cheering you on. So thank you
thank
for letting me take the host or hostess seat
Yeah, thank
and you
you.
being my guest. I think this was great. I think from time to time, I think I'm going to get used to this. Every
Yeah,
now and then, jump in and say, "Hey, I want to host." So,
yeah,
so
it's
this
like
was fun.
is it Jimmy Fallon. I think it's Jimmy Fallon that does that, where like he'll have like another celebrity
Yeah,
host his show.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, well,
This is great.
no, Phil,
Well
thank
done,
you.
well done. This was great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Yes, we'll be back again. He will be host next time.